The U.S. credit rating, Standard & Poor's, a key agency that advises investors on long-term securities, lowered America's credit rating from AAA to AA+.
It has never happened before. It's all about how the country will pay for its debt, and S&P pointed the finger at Washington.
So in its report, the agency noted the, quote, difficulties in bridging the gulf between the political parties. It also added that it's become pessimistic about Congress and the Obama administration's ability to stabilize the nation's debt problem.
In 2011, the United States had its credit rating downgraded for the first time ever, all because Tea Party Republicans threatened to not raise the debt ceiling under President Obama. The parties came to an agreement just before we hit our credit limit, but the damage was done. Now, in case you need a refresher on the debt ceiling, it's the level of debt that Congress authorizes the federal government to take on. Once we reach the point where we can no longer pay our bills, Congress has to lift that ceiling. It's meant to be routine government business. Since 1960, Congress has acted 78 separate times to permanently raise, temporarily extend, or revise the terms of the debt limit. 49 times under Republican presidents and 29 times under Democrats. But in the modern era, it's become increasingly politicized. George W. Bush was able to raise the debt ceiling 7 times. But he was met with Democratic opposition when they were in the minority, and many opposed his seemingly unlimited war and Pentagon spending. A majority of Republicans voted for those increases, so the risk of a default was never a big threat, even when Democrats regained the majority. Those votes against were mostly a message to Democratic voters, a statement of values. It's Republicans who took us to the brink of actual default in 2011, once they gained the House and Obama was in the White House. Quite frankly, that was about messaging, too, a statement of their values, Tea Party values, a sudden zeal to shrink the government and drown it in a bathtub for some reason. Meanwhile, their favorite president, Donald Trump, was able to raise the debt ceiling twice. He had Democratic support, which allowed those on the far right to vote against the bill, once again, without the specter of a looming default. In fact, the national debt rose by nearly $7.8 trillion with a T dollars during Trump's time in office due to his tax cuts for the super rich. You are still paying that bill. You're welcome. But now that a Democrat is president again, spending is back to being forbidden. Republicans, including their leadership, are threatening to not allow President Biden to raise the debt ceiling without major spending cuts to programs like Social Security and Medicare, because to hell with the sick and the old people. Am I right? Yeah, the White House is they're not gonna allow that.
I think it is critical that we change the way we're doing business. And I intend to use the debt ceiling to ensure that we get fiscal and structural reforms.
We cannot continue to operate with these types of deficits. Our national debt is one of our biggest threats to our national security.
We have to refuse to raise the debt ceiling. We have to get spending back under control, and we have to do that by any means possible. And if that means the government shutdown, then I'll be calling for a government shutdown, because this government shut our country down with those COVID shutdowns.
Oh, my God. Tomorrow, the government will have to resort to extraordinary measures to continue paying its bills. But time's up in June, when Congress will need to act. If they don't, we go into default, which could lead to a whole world of hurt, including a possible stock market crash or a recession, higher interest rates, a weaker dollar, another credit downgrade, and a 4% decline in GDP. Oh, and up to 6 million job losses. Yay, MAGA. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California and Robert Reich, Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration and Professor of Public Policy at UC Berkeley. I want to thank both of you for being here. And I do want to start with you, Congressman, because, you know, the non-routineness of raising the debt limit is a purely political thing, you know, and I can recall Democrats who opposed seemingly unlimited Pentagon and Iraq war spending making a statement by opposing the increase in the debt limit. I think when he was a Senator Obama did that. But they did that knowing that they were not the votes that were going to cause the debt limit to be overreached. So it was a statement. It was not an attack on our economy. This is different, because you hear these Republicans saying we've got to get our spending back under control, but they didn't have a problem with racking up $7.8 trillion under Trump. Your thoughts?
Joy, you're absolutely right. They did it as a statement to remind the American people that President Clinton, under whose administration Secretary Reich served, left this country with budget surpluses. Then what happened? President Bush went into Iraq. President Bush had these massive tax cuts for the wealthy. President Bush caused a financial crisis that led to spending to recover from that. And Trump gave a massive tax cut. So to have the Republicans who have caused this debt lecture us about the debt is the height of hypocrisy. And all we're saying is pay the past bills because you've racked them up. We're not going to default on the debt you've incurred. And let's debate future spending.
Yeah, I mean, our wonderful colleague Stephanie Ruhle has basically likened it to a credit card. You know, you run up the credit card bill, and then at the end of the month, you're like, I am not paying that. I refuse to pay those bills. No, that's not how it works. And Robert Reich, that's the point that I think bugs me the most. The first time I'm not going to age myself, but I was in high school when Ronald Reagan was president, and the huge deficits he ran up were because of the thing Republicans love to do. Lots of tax cuts for the super rich. Clinton cleans that up. Then they come back and do more tax cuts for the super rich, and more huge defense spending. They keep cutting the super rich's taxes and then saying, we've got to get the budget under control. Your thoughts?
Well, that's happened again and again and again, Joy. You're absolutely right. And I remember in the Clinton administration, it was almost as if we had a giant pooper scooper, and we had to go around and clean up the mess created by Reagan and the first Bush administration. And then we cleaned it up. And what happened? The next Bush administration created an even bigger mess. And as you pointed out, Donald Trump spent $7.8 trillion, increased the national debt by $7.8 trillion, and raised the debt ceiling. I mean, there was no problem raising debt ceiling when Republicans have the power and Republicans are in the White House. Yes, the Republicans will raise the debt ceiling, but suddenly the deficit becomes a big deal when Democrats have the White House, and the deficit not only becomes a big deal, but there are threats to not raise the debt ceiling and thereby hold hostage the full faith and credit of the United States, stiffing essentially all our creditors.
And Congressman, you know, it's also a matter of who is demanding this. These Tea Party Republicans have it in for Social Security and Medicare. And the cuts they're demanding are to anything that helps the old or the poor. They want to cut food stamps. They want to cut Meals on Wheels. They want to cut Social Security and Medicare that people have paid their tax money into. They never say they want to do these cuts to cut anything that helps anybody rich. They just want to hurt poor people and old people. And they're demanding that President Biden somehow be willing to sign a bill to do that.
So they're coming from a position of weakness because they know their case is so unpopular with the American people. They don't have the skill to be able to defend it and make a case legitimately. The only way they can do it is to threaten to hijack and bankrupt the American economy. And there's a clear contrast. Look, the Democrats under John Lawson, we want to increase Social Security benefits. We don't want Social Security benefits for the working class to be taxed. We are for helping people in the working and middle class. And they know that's a winning argument. We don't have to threaten to hijack and bankrupt the American economy. They do because they can't win the political argument.